and we need to do a good job of making sure that all the pieces of the curriculum we choose are implemented with integrity. That last piece is then to monitor and adjust. So once we make that choice, we don't just throw our hands up and say, great, we're done. We need to make sure that there's an ongoing process for making sure that we go back and we often check to make sure that it's still the right piece of resource or curriculum or tools. This is something that Dr. Knapp and myself are kind of looking at and making sure that we don't need to update anything. Our current adoption handbook is very long, so we're trying to make sure that we are being as efficient as possible. So updating it with some links to the current things that are on our website, and just making sure that we've included all of the hard work that's been happening in the district and that it's updated. So we do hope to come back to you later this year and share any updates to that handbook. But I wanted to give you that frame of reference just as a reminder for how we actually make the choices that we do when it comes to curriculum and instruction. So I have the easy part tonight. Dr. Knapp is going to be talking for quite a bit longer, but I'll update you on what's happening at the elementary level. A lot of this work happened last year and continues to go on this year. So we'll start with social studies. They are in the process of an extended implementation of the SAVIS program. So there is a small group of teachers who were on this committee who actually have this curriculum in their hands and are trying it with our students and really testing out what it looks like, what's available, and all of the components, the digital pieces, really making sure that we make a good choice. This committee has already met once this year, and actually they've met more than once because SAVIS has come out to provide some additional professional development for our teachers that are implementing it. And they'll continue to look at the SAVIS program, make sure that it's still exactly what we want. Social studies is a very important topic, as we know, especially in today's world, so we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence there, and then we will continue to practice and collaborate and come back to you with a course of study. So that work continues, so stay tuned. Science is similar in where they're at. They selected the Mystery Science program. Previously, I had experience with the Mystery Science, and I was so excited to see that Mystery Science is happening here in Westerville. If you haven't had the chance to check out a Mystery Science lesson, just let me know, because I will happily share that with you. It's a lot of hands-on, inquiry-based pieces. When you walk into a kindergarten classroom and you hear them, think, pair, share, and they're turning and they're talking about scientists, and they're engaged in hands-on experiments. It's really exciting to see. And, we talk a lot about reading and writing and math, but I don't want to forget about science and social studies, because that's where some of that excitement and passion is born, and we can't lose sight of that. So really excited about the work of Mystery Science. It was recommended that we move forward with that extended implementation this year, and so that's what's happening. I had the opportunity to sit on the Science Committee's first meeting this year, talking about how it's going, looking at the course of study and the pacing, and do we look like we have everything in the right spot? And the feedback from the staff in that group was phenomenal. They are so excited to have such a high-quality resource. What they shared about the students in their classroom and being excited about the experiments especially, and the videos that come with it, they just have been, I know that the fifth grade classroom I went in and had moldy bread hanging on all around the room because they were studying what happens when things kind of decay. So that was pretty fun too. We plan to bring back to you guys the finalized course of study at the end of this year, once we've adjusted the pacing and have a little more information and experience with that program. Also want to highlight that we are moving forward with the next generation science standards, and this is something that Dr. Knapp and I have stayed in communication on to make sure that we're preparing all of our scientists in the district to make sure that we are not only meeting the Ohio learning standards, but also looking forward to those next generation science standards. And then again, we've offered professional development. Ms. Relford kind of alluded to the fact that it doesn't matter how good your curriculum is if you're not training your teachers and they don't know how to use the resources. So we're going to continue to look at what's needed and make sure that our teachers are prepared. A couple other updates. I have enjoyed meeting with art, music, and physical education staff. We've met a few times already this year. So at our November We Day coming up, they are going to take a deep dive look at their course of study. Some of them haven't been revised in a while. So they're going to sit together and have time to really dig into it, look at what's been updated, and come together to make some recommendations. So stay tuned on that. It's starting with just a review of what do we have and what needs to be tweaked or changed. And then English learners, I've really enjoyed working with our English language department, and we have been digging into the data. I'm a little bit of a data junkie, so that presentation was like right up my alley, but we have been really looking at what holes might there be in the curriculum and instruction for our EL learners. And just making sure that we are addressing the right needs. So we're using data to drive that discussion, and we'll be in collaboration with that department as well. Sound good? Yeah. All right. I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Good evening. And I believe last year when we put all of our courses online on our Google Sites, it was really telling when we had to put 178 courses in secondary. And so we have a lot of little pieces to this puzzle as we work to support our teachers and our students. Also, what will come into play tonight is Ohio Revised Code, which is sort of interesting at the high school level because our legislature decides some things that are required, including financial literacy. So previously, it was instruction needed to be provided, and we put that as part of our government courses, AP and IB government. More recently, they have decided that it needs to be its own course, so it needs to be a semester-long course for the students that are current freshmen or the cohort of 2026. I can remember that because my daughter's at 25, so I'm like, okay, not Reagan, 1 year after. So, because the cohorts, they get a little tricky to keep track of. And so we have been working very closely, our government teachers who had previously taught the instruction provided, and our business teachers. Personal money management is a course that was very similar. That is going to no longer be offered. We also have a college credit plus course called Personal Finance, which does meet these requirements. So we have a team of 3 business teachers and 3 government teachers who are working together to develop this course. It will be a new offering, so you will see it brought before you later this fall. I will say that I sat in on that PD, as well as Matt Meisner, who oversees business, and Dr. Williams, and it was just an extremely engaging conversation. I mean, they're mapping everything out. They're talking about credit and debt and insurance and risk and what is really risk. And it was, okay, so obviously I was a social studies nerd, but it was extremely interesting. And it's a little bit funny because our business teachers will also always be able to teach it. Our social studies teachers will always be able to, I shouldn't say always when I'm talking about like Ohio Department of Education. Sorry, permanent? No, I don't know. They've used different words, but for the foreseeable future, those 2 groups will be able to teach the course. There will also be professional development provided by ODE if we would want a different, a teacher who did not have those requirements to teach that course. We're still working with Mrs. Baldwin on the FTE impact because this doesn't change that we still have 20 graduation requirements. This just now makes a required elective, if that's such a thing. So because it doesn't count toward the, initially the conversation was it would count as one of the 3 social studies requirements, course requirements. It does not count as one of those, and its own special EMIS code and the whole 9 yards. So look for that later this fall. Social studies, we have 3 significant changes. One is our compacted 7-8. This allows our students in 8th grade to take the American history course because also Ohio Revised Code says if you're going to take a high school social studies course, you have had to have had American history, which is what is offered in 8th grade. But the gifted department did a great amount of research and surveys with teachers, and Dr. Nestor Baker smiled. She knows who that is. Last year. Great job. But our teachers, parents, and students to talk about the pluses and minuses of that course. So we're using that feedback as well as strategies from the gifted department on ways to compact it to honor the feedback provided by those three groups. So that's going to be exciting work. Also, in grade 8, the updated ODE standards no longer put financial literacy as part of their standards. However, Ohio Revised Code, remember I told you that would come up a lot, require that it needs to be taught, financial literacy needs to be taught in grades 7 and 8. With this new financial literacy requirement in high school, it's really given us the building blocks necessary to do this right. That's why last year you saw the regular 6 and 7 social studies courses come before you. We knew we wanted some more time to work with our 8th grade teachers and to kind of figure out that high school piece to get this course right. And with government, updating to the new standards, so we'll be taking that financial literacy piece out and putting in a new peace officer content. So there's 4 components to that. Actually, one of our teachers at South High School is on the committee for this. She will be presenting to teachers on WE Day around the new model curriculum. It's currently in draft form. Her initial feedback is it is really tied closely to when we government teachers teach the Bill of Rights. When it comes to rights of the accused, there's a few more pieces, but her initial feeling is that it fit pretty naturally into that part of our current courses study. ELA and English learners, so shifting the focus to skill and student mastery, as well as updating our materials. And then we have corresponding EL courses that align to those ELA courses. You did see EL brought before you last year, and that focuses on acquiring the language. These courses are a support piece to their English requirements, which there are 4 in high school. Health. We are updating our health courses. We don't have state standards for health. Actually, very few states do. So we align with national standards. And there are 7 new pieces required by Ohio Revised Code. And so we are updating our high school course to reflect those. And actually, I met with parent council on Wednesday and had a conversation with them and got a lot of good feedback and got their perspective. Part of their conversations are just, they're just wanting to learn exactly what we do in our health courses, and we've met with teachers, and we're in the process of getting some questions answered back and forth. So it was a very, from my perspective, a very productive and eye-opening meeting. So a lot of great conversation happening. And life skills, this is from our special education department. They've been working to revise their adaptive courses to scaffold independence with real life experiences and providing a lot of resources for our students. And math, updating courses of study. We have several here. 2 years ago, we brought middle school math before you. If you remember when we adopted the Common Core, we kind of had to chunk it out because some of the things that were taught in Algebra 2 got moved to Algebra 1, but then we couldn't just stop and not teach the kids who were in geometry. So that was a little stair step. We've extended some of our licenses in Algebra 1 and grade 8 Algebra 1, and are working to have a more unified adoption process. So for the next, we're not doing several different courses in smaller chunks, but trying to chunk these together a little bit. A quick difference between grade 8 Algebra 1 and Algebra 1, it's not compacted, it's the accelerated 7-8. Remember last year we changed the name. Teaches all of 7th grade math and 2/3 of 8th grade. And so 8th grade Algebra 1 actually has 1/3 of grade 8 and all of Algebra 1. Did I say that right? Okay. Okay, and yes, with geometry honors, algebra 2, and honors algebra 2. We will probably be speaking in the coming months about the role of algebra 2. ODE has a lot of things in the fire about what does algebra 2 really mean. And, you know, we have a piece that you could take a computer science course, or you can take, you know, MMR, and which is mathematical modeling and reasoning, but just does every student still need algebra 2 is something that the state is tossing around. So stay tuned for that little teaser. And science and engineering, like this slide has the most words of any of our slides, I think, maybe the whole night. So we only have 2 that are on. Well, all of these are on our adoption process, but only 2 that are specific to Westerville. That's us deciding, hey, this is the time for these. Project Lead the Way, which is both middle school and high school, have revised their courses, so we need to align our work to them. If you recognize this is our health pathway, our engineering pathway, several of these middle school courses came with middle school redesign, super exciting, engaging courses. And then lastly, the International Baccalaureate, again, 3 courses are being revised. And it's interesting because they are 2-year courses, we adopt them the year before they're actually, or 2 years before they're actually tested, because they have to kind of start on the train. So, and I don't know if mine was easier or longer or shorter, I don't know. So now we'd like to open it up to any questions from either of us.
Thank you for all of this information. This is great. Can you talk for a moment to us about how the 2 departments work together, and how do you interface together, kind of to make sure that there is no drop off or gap between K-5 and then when you shift and go to secondary to 6 through 12? How are the 2 departments, how are you working together?
Start and then you can add. Sound good?
So see, we finished each other's sentences.
Perfect.
We're done.
Dr. Knapp and I meet weekly, usually more than once a week right now, just because there's so much for me to come up to speed on and make sure that I understand the processes. And she has been super helpful, along with our whole T&L department, to be honest. I think we're doing a great job of collaborating and working across not just the curriculum department, but connecting with EL, connecting with gifted, connecting with mental health and wellness. So I know that we are already collaborating a lot. We also are working with our curriculum specialists to make sure that they're in the same conversations that they need to be. I referenced the next generation science standards. That's a perfect example where we have our curriculum specialists talking to each other, making sure we're all in the loop and moving things forward. Do you want to add anything?
Of course, I have to say something. Yeah, I would agree. We've met with almost every teaching and learning department talking about professional learning, their data, you know, how do all the pieces and parts fit together, and how can we support them? You know, we'll look at our calendar. Oh, we have an hour here. Do you have an hour here? Just constantly trying to touch base with each other, updating the curriculum materials. Again, as she said, let's just put links. It went from 40 pages to 20. So constant communication and really getting our teams to gel. They're doing our instructional rounds, so are we. So your team, and it's just, so far it's just been based on availability, but your team's been able to come and see our secondary instructional rounds, which was super exciting and fun to have you. So just as much as we can. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I just think it's important for the public and for parents to kind of understand how that process works as well. So yes, thank you.
A couple of questions. One is, this one is just kind of what you're thinking is philosophically, I think, more than anything. You were talking about the financial literacy half credit. And, you know, we've known that's coming, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to fit that in well, and the way that that's going to play in our approach to delivery. I am concerned about it because it's already very difficult for our students to schedule the electives they want. And of course, then we have this required elective, this non-elective elective that we'll be adding on as well. And I'm wondering, as we look at that implementation, I don't even know how I can answer this question. As we look at that implementation, how we can approach scheduling in such a way that we don't further limit student ability, particularly as they look at taking coursework in the arts. It's often a difficult fit for those courses, especially compared with, well, at this point, higher level courses that are scheduled at the same time. So I'm worried about how the financial literacy course is going to impact the electives. I'm wondering if you're giving any thought to that, even as we go forward to design the best course we can, which we should, and it is important, but what's it going to do to the rest of the schedule?
Well, and I think that's something that Ann and I have had a lot of conversation about already, looking at, okay, how many students take personal money management? How many students take the personal finance college credit plus course? How many students are in sociology and psychology, those half credit, as well as how does it impact overall? So as we look at course enrollment or course requests, I think that would be a place to start determining what we offer, what we may need to come back and ask for, and can we support our student experience the best we can within the constraints of what we have, or do we need to ask for those constraints to be modified?
Thank you. I'm glad that that's on your radar. I figured it would be, and thank you for being able to answer the question that I was fumbling around trying to ask. And your slide on ELA, you talk about the shift in focus from content to skill. And you talk about updating materials and so forth. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how that shift from content to skill might play out as regards the approved resources that we utilize.
And so, one, we have a very dated anthology, so that would be a piece that we want to examine. Also, helping our teachers connect, and I think it's sometimes, I don't want to say cart before the horse, but it's like, oh, I love this book. Let me see what standards work well with it. More of a, hey, let's look at the standards and what resources best support it. So I'd say that is the biggest shift. We do, and we are working on our approved novel list and what it takes to be on there and the criteria and the understanding, as well as similar to the Google sites, having transparency with the novels that are on any course of study so that a parent, another teacher, students could go and look and see what that book is really about and have that understanding.
Excellent. And that, you just segued right into the last two short points that I want to make. One, which is, I think it's really important to drive home the message, and you did, to drive home the message that it's the standards that drive the curriculum. It's not the resources. And that gets mixed up in people's minds. It's not the resources, and there is also a difference between approved resources and what some people, bring in to supplement. But our curricula are driven by standards, and that's where our focus is. So I appreciate that thread that weaves through everything you're talking about. That's really important. And I want to thank you. You mentioned the putting the curriculum online, all of the various curricula that we have. I know that was a very heavy lift, and I very much appreciate all of that work. I appreciate the transparency that we're engaged in as regards our curriculum process. It's kind of like I was talking with the other report. So many people say so many things, and they use schools, as a punching bag for whatever, and they use us as a rumor mill when sometimes they don't need to. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And our insistence on the transparency of our curriculum and our insistence on the transparency of our process for curriculum is extraordinarily important, and it flies in the face of what is often said about schools in general. So thank you for all of that work. I know it's been and continues to be a lot, and I know I was one of the ones pushing for it, so thank you for still speaking to me. I appreciate all of your work, and I appreciate this report. It's also very helpful for us to see what happens in the process after we've approved something.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for diving into that detail, and we must be at an hour and a half because my allergies kicked in, so sorry about that. I can only control it for about an hour and a half. So, lots of issues related to the financial literacy half course and half credit, and I know that you're really looking at those as the curriculum liaison for secondary. We've talked about that pretty extensively. So, I think just continuing to update us, we'll really appreciate that on how that government course, especially with the new peace officer content, right, with the extraction of the financial literacy component and the addition of the new peace officer content, what that's going to look like. Really will appreciate that. And the other thing I wanted to just touch on and get some clarification for anybody who may still be paying attention after an hour and a half is on the science and engineering slide, you talked about how there's so much content there, but really only 2 of these are ours, right? Because there's a project Lead the Way.
Correct, yes, those
Piece.
are on our locally adopted.
Exactly,
Yes.
our locally adopted list. So the project Lead the Way piece and then the IB piece, they're a little bit different. And I just wonder if you could explain that to folks who may not have heard about those.
Yeah, so our IB program at South High School, I don't want to call it's like a third party, if you will, but they determine when and to what extent their courses of study get revised. So I work closely with Bill Heinmiller, and they have a very organized plan. I mean, I think everyone, and it was mentioned earlier, is a little off from COVID. So we're probably going to see an uptick of training, and maybe even in-person training, who knows, in the next couple years. So they drive when we need to revise those courses. And then, as I mentioned, we need to do so in a timely manner. If those teachers are to be able to teach the courses, they have to go through the proper credentialing to do that. Same with Project Lead the Way. They too, it shouldn't look as many, but due to COVID, they didn't make updates as well. And it's a very hands-on curriculum. So when we got a straight A grant a long time ago, and we started with HBS and PBS to begin our health pathway, they were Project Lead the Way courses, and the professional learning is like no other. I mean, by the time we're done with PD, it'll be just the same. But no, every teacher says, I teach better for teaching a Project Lead the Way course because of the skills that I learn. So, and we pay a license to have those courses, and it's been extremely beneficial to our students and staff.
Thank you so much, because I know those are terms that lots of people hear all the time, but they don't really know how that connects to that third-party piece and what that means for curriculum adoption process. So thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So I have elementary school, or elementary curriculum questions. So when we talk about the committees, and you're adopting new pieces of curriculum, about how many people sit on a committee?
Anywhere from 25 to 30. We've only had one meeting this year, so I can't really speak to last year, but I'll look at Cheryl, and I think it was about 25 to 30.
Sometimes they can start closer to 40 or 45, but then find over time the number doesn't increase.
And so do each of those teachers then test the materials in their classrooms?
I don't know the answer to that either. That's okay. I'll learn right along with you.
So we've been a little bit creative.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's been a range of experiences based upon the feedback from teachers. With science and social studies, it's been anyone on the committee has had access to those materials. So much so with Mystery Science, when we purchased it this year for all K-5 teachers to have a year of going through that experience. We want to thank you for supporting that. So all K-5 teachers beyond the committee are using Mystery Science this year, which is phenomenal. And so that's been really great. And then for social studies, it's just the committee that has had access to it.
So what type of data do you collect then to choose the materials?
It's teacher input and feedback.
Okay, that's what I was.
So we usually start, last year with science and social studies, we started with teachers volunteering to be on the committee.
Okay.
We encourage, usually once the committee members start working, they usually bring somebody with them because if they're really excited about the resource, it grows. And then sometimes it is just who we started out with and they stick with it. With Mystery Science, we had a lot of teachers already in our district who had experimented with a trial a couple years ago. That company actually gave it to us for free, and so that was not a hard sell. I mean, people were like, oh, we like this. Let's really dig in a little deeper. And so that's been great. And with Mystery Science, there are these student kits that come with it, so they get all of the supporting supplemental resources to do all the experiences. And we know that learning is best when kids are doing it. And so at the elementary level, we've done a really good job of purchasing materials that create those opportunities for students. And so the feedback has been great. With social studies, it's a smaller group, and I think it's around that 30 to 35. And what we found with them, they looked at 3 different programs, and we landed with Savis, and they wanted more time with it. And so that's what was happening this year. And so thank you for supporting that, because in order for that to happen, we had to at least purchase the textbooks for students, because that part is an expensive piece, but the company did give us the teacher guides and all of those things and the digital component. So it's a work in progress, and we've shifted how we've done it based upon the feedback we've got from our staff and teachers across the district. So thank you for working with us over the past 3 years to make it work for teachers, because I think that's where we need to be, because students will benefit from that work.
Agree. That's it for me. Thank you so much, both of you, all 3 of you.
Thanks for letting me run up to the front.
Do you mind if I just make a
Yes,
few quick
please.
comments?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here quietly. So first of all, thank you. Wow, tremendously busy department with all that work going on, and I greatly appreciate that. 2, I really appreciated, and I know the board caught it, your attention to teacher voice in this process. They're our experts, all right? And our job is not to tell them what to do, but to listen to what they need. And I think you guys are doing an outstanding job of bringing them in and having them participate. The other thing I heard that I want to point out is regulations. They keep coming heavy and heavy and heavy, oftentimes well-intentioned, but without really understanding the system. I think Dr. Nestor Baker and some of the other board members pointing out their concern about you add that non-elective elective, and that's going to bump something in somebody's schedule. And I think, as Mrs. Altman was alluding to, what's the flexibilities we can have? The equivalent for me would be how we worked with our students with health and PE as a requirement for years. And that was a big summer school program for a long time. So I think we're going to need that kind of flexibility. It's a worthwhile curriculum, something our kids need, but it just robs an opportunity. The other thing I want to point out, in this, Jen, you and I had these conversations back 10 years ago, which is looking at our specialized groups, special education, EL, which for a long time wasn't really embedded into the work that we were doing in a consistent manner. It was kind of off on its own and siloed. And I mentioned Jen because she was at the core of that when I started, and it's grown, and watching the whole curriculum instruction team bring that in, as well as guidance counselors and the curriculum they provide, and our wellness curriculum that we provide. So there's a broad spectrum in there of things that we're doing. School counselors, thank you. I get corrected on that one oftentimes. So really appreciate their attention to those pieces. And then the last piece is just the public piece and the transparency. That's been a goal of ours. We have, and we've talked about here with policies we have in place that allow for community and parent input. Tonight's presentation is new and different in that we want the community and our board to see at the front end what we're working on this year, so they can pay attention and know that that opportunity is going to come to hear what's in the curriculum, to review that, to see the materials before the board adopts it. And I think that's an important piece, and then putting it online as transparency. Because there are additional regulatory pieces in the hopper that legislators are looking at that are an overreach. in terms of what they expect from teachers. They are looking at legislation that's going to require teachers to post minuscule amounts of information at a deadline in the summer that makes no sense. I don't understand how a teacher can post exactly what they're going to do in March of the year and have that posted by July 1. We don't even know if some of our teachers are going to be teaching what courses in July 1. So we're staring at those pieces, and we'll talk about that with the board and the more in our community in particular. So thanks for the busy work. Thanks for teacher voice, the transparency piece, and bringing these other components into the larger piece. Because I think if you play this back into the report card report, right, that's where these things come together. So kudos to the whole team, to Scott Reeves and the whole team, and you all for the work you're doing, for the board, for your support of this work. I know how much this means to you also. Thank you.
Okay. 5.1, a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, October 10th, 2022, as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments here? Questions? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any public comments this evening. That takes us to financials. 7.1, approve the financial report and investments for September 2022. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Whenever you're ready, Nicole.
Yes, thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. This month, we are going over the month end for September. This is the third month in the fiscal year that started on July the 1st. So for the general fund for year-to-date receipts, we had $90.7 million for fiscal year-to-date. And then year-to-date expenditures, we had $49.5 million. For general fund unencumbered balance ended at $187.7 million. And then for all funds, we had year-to-date receipts of $113.8 million as of September 30th. And then all funds expenditures, $83.9 million as of September 30th. And then we ended with unencumbered fund balances for all of our funds combined at $255.2 million. Again, just a reminder, we do have a lot of bond project money in that balance that has not been spent yet. Any questions? Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Is everyone okay if we take this as one? Personnel consent agenda, 8.1 through 8.13. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Welcome, Carrie.
Good evening. Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Mrs. Marshall. I'd like to present to you for your consideration tonight's personnel consent agenda. This evening, we are asking the board to consider and approve the usual array of personnel items that include the following items of note. The updated classified substitute rates of pay that are a result of the recently approved AAS guidelines and OPSI 138 contract. The contractual status changes of 3 individuals. Jody Brown will be the interim EL coordinator, replacing Lucy Rader Brown upon her retirement. Angela Heath will serve as the interim gifted coordinator, replacing Chris Doolittle, who will be shifting to substitute as the assistant principal at McVeigh Elementary School, while Angela Hayes will serve as the interim principal at Robert Frost Elementary School, while Ms. Burka takes some time to focus on some personal matters. Lastly, and with great honor, we have 2 retirements to recognize this evening. Amy Roush will retire from Westerville South High School with 30 years of service to Westerville City Schools, and Linda Mapes will be retiring also from Westerville South High School with 39 years of service. So we want to thank them for that commitment and their time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Would it be okay if we took old business as one? Okay. 9.1 through 9.5, old business. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here on any of these items? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. New business, 10.1, first reading policy 7470, facility security, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Mrs. Marshall. Tonight, you have in front of you a revision to Policy 7440, Facility Security. In order to protect the health, welfare, and safety of our students, staff, and visitors, and board property, this policy has been revised to authorize the superintendent to install security devices that would assist in the detection of unauthorized objects like vape pens or other prohibited equipment or devices in our school buildings, district property, and/or a board-sponsored event. This revision reflects the current state of the law that should be adopted to maintain accurate policies. Thus, it is recommended that the board adopt the changes in Policy 7440 as written.
Any questions here? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. McElroy.
Thank you.
Up next, 10.2, first reading policy 8210, school calendar, and Mr. Jordan is with us. Welcome.
Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Altman, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. I'd like to present to you a brief revision to Policy 8210, school calendar. The change just moves some information to the associated administrative guidelines where it is better suited. There's also some clarifying language around conditions that would prohibit the use of a building or a school buses that might cause a calamity day. It's recommended that you approve these small minor changes to Policy 8210, school calendar.
Any questions or comments here?
Just one comment. Thank you for moving some chunks out of the policy into guidelines where they belong. Thank you.
Okay. Recommended action, donations, 11.1. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions or comments here?
Just, excuse me, just want to thank all of the contributors for their very generous donations and gifts to the district, and especially for all that it does for our staff and students. So thank you for these kind donations.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.2, overnight and out-of-state field trip. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Mrs. Baldwin.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Mrs. Marshall. This is a field trip request that will take sixth graders to New York City after the school year has ended. So it takes place at the end of May into June, and parents will be traveling with the students as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Have we done this trip before?
I believe prior to my role there, or me being in this position, we have had trips for our middle school students that have gone out of state. They've worked with a travel agency, they ride a charter bus, and they typically take place outside of the school year. So it's an optional trip for students and families.
It's a great opportunity.
It's neat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.3, impractical to transport. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Welcome back.
Thank you again. This resolution is requesting the board approve adding students to the impractical to transport list. Ohio law allows for public schools to determine impracticality of transportation after consideration of a number of factors such as the cost of providing transportation and the number of students being transported. The Office of Purchasing and Logistics evaluates each listed private school student per the requirements of Section 3327.02 of the Ohio Revised Code for determination status. Approving this resolution would allow the district to offer payment in lieu of transportation in the manner provided for by the Ohio Revised Code. The payment in lieu amount is determined by the state and is $538.55, and it is recommended that the board approve this resolution.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.4, resolution to approve the urgent necessity boiler repair at South High School. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
This urgent necessity resolution before you is to repair the hydrostatic boiler at Westerville South. Given the time frame of the year and the heating season just around the corner, it is being recommended that the board approve this urgent necessity resolution. The cost of the project exceeds the $50,000 threshold requiring a public bid. However, there is just not enough time to complete this process. Thus, it is being recommended that the board approve this resolution.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none. Thank you.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.5, House Bill 126 resolution. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
And Ms. Marshall, do you want to?
Yes, I would like to read the resolution, just a little bit about House Bill 126. So that was passed earlier in the year by legislators, and it severely handicapped the Board of Revisions process for the school district, and it also is threatening fair taxation across communities. So let me read the resolution with that in mind. So a resolution regarding the passage of House Bill 126, whereas the state of Ohio passed House Bill 126 and Governor Mike DeWine signed it into law on April 21st, 2022. And whereas House Bill 126 creates a large burden on Westerville City Schools and its resources. And whereas House Bill 126 violates equal protection and uniform rules under the Ohio Constitution. And whereas House Bill 126 creates an environment where property taxes are not fairly distributed among taxpayers. And whereas voters within the Westerville schools voted in favor to approve ballot measures that provide property tax revenues for its schools. And whereas House Bill 126 reduces the amount of property tax revenue Westerville City Schools receives as the state of Ohio legislature continues to underfund the state's school funding formula. And whereas the Westerville City Schools Board of Education believes in fair taxation for all property taxpayers. Now therefore be it resolved, the Westerville City Schools Board of Education supports engaging a legal review of House Bill 126. And be it further resolved, the Westerville City Schools Board of Education does not support any law that violates the Ohio Constitution or erodes fair taxation.
Any questions or comments?
Just want to say thank you, Ms. Marshall, for keeping us informed on this and for all of your work that has gone into staying on top of this issue for us. Thank you.
And the comment I want to make is that when we were each sworn into office, we took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Ohio. And sometimes the only possible way to do that is by challenging what the legislature has done. And this is one of those instances that legal redress may be the only option we have. And it is in many ways an upholding of what we swore to do.
Ms. Marshall, I know that we've been through this several times, but in 15 seconds, because you'll be able to do it in 15 and I won't be, can you let people know what's the crux of the issue?
Yeah, so the crux of the issue is House Bill 120. So the Board of Revisions process is where we have a property in the district that's undervalued. So when that property sells, just for example, a property in the district may be valued on the county auditor's records at $500,000, which means that any effective tax rate that other property taxpayers, that all property taxpayers pay on, is based on that $500,000 value. When that property sells for $1 million, it's worth twice as much as what the county auditor has it valued at. And we would typically file with the Board of Revisions to have that value corrected so that the effective tax rates can be correct for all of the community that pays property taxes. This bill creates a lot of bureaucracy to the process. One, the Board of Education has to pass separate resolutions for anything we can file on. We cannot file on anything that is more than 5% or more than $500,000 and 10% of the value, with the difference in the value. And we cannot appeal any decision of the Board of Revisions. And also, if the Board of Revisions doesn't act on it within a year, it simply goes away. And so there's a lot of opportunities for this to severely handicap the district's ability to protect property taxpayers and property tax revenue for the school district, which is why we do not support this.
I think for me, the key line is when those property valuations are allowed to progress through the process that has recently been passed, it costs all of the other taxpayers. It's more than a dollars and cents issue. This is a function of what happens to all the taxpayers within the district when some taxpayers receive what amounts to preferential treatment.
Yeah, this is about, the pie is essentially fixed, right? And so when somebody they're giving a smaller slice of pie than they should be, everybody else has to give up more pie. I mean, that's why this is so important. And really appreciate all of your work on it. And your explanation was at least 3 times as fast as mine would have been, so thanks, and much better.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The other piece that it also adds is that if someone's seeking a reduction in value for whatever the reason may be, we have no opportunity to challenge that if we don't believe that that makes sense for the property. There's a lot of loopholes that people have figured out along the way, and one of them are called like a drop-down LLC, where they will sell the company instead of the property and then transfer the property as part of that so that it doesn't reflect on the real estate roles. So they've gotten very sneaky over the years, and so this is just empowering that kind of business. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your work on this.
Absolutely. Ready to vote?
Yes, please.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any public comments this evening, and that takes us to board comments. Would anyone like to go first? Who would like to go first?
We've been through a lot of material. If I could just give a big thanks to the 2 retirees.
Yeah.
With Linda Mapes and Amy Roush at Westerville South, that's a big change in one building. And I just know how much they've impacted so many students over the years, and just really incredible ways that have changed lives forever, like all of our educators do, but just taking a chance to thank them for their particular work. So thank you.
I wanted to do that too. Yep, you did it, you did it. Linda and Amy are pillars of the staff at South. They're pillars of the staff in this district. And, they're remarkable people with remarkable careers. Thinking of Amy in particular, I first met Amy when she was a cheerleader for South, and Amy has never stopped cheerleading for South. In so many ways, for the students of South, for the district as a whole, for what it means to be not only a Wildcat, but a Westerville Schools resident. She cheers for us, with us, always. And Linda, oh my gosh, she has just been a mainstay in moving a lot of the courses forward that we've been talking about, and her engagement in that has been pivotal.
In addition to what's already been said, I just want to once again thank Joy Rose for just all that she has done to make Westerville City Schools what's so great. And so it's an honor to be able to name the Media Center on her behalf this evening. I also want to thank, again, the report card team and the curriculum team for their presentations. I didn't go into it while they were presenting, but one of the concerns that I had, that I know all of us had, and many in our community had, centered around the issue of learning loss that our students have suffered during the pandemic period. And so their presentations have done a wonderful job of helping us as a board and our community to see the great and tremendous work that our educators have done with our students in the midst of the pandemic to really help our students to meet the needs that they have. And so I want to thank the staff and thank all of our educators for all of the work that they have done. And then just one last thing that I wanted to mention tonight that I thought would be appropriate, if we would please keep in, and I know this term gets thrown around a lot, but I really do mean it, if we could keep in our thoughts and prayers the St. Louis School District with the school shooting that took place earlier today. If we could please remember and pray for the families that have been affected and impacted, the students, the staff, and the entire St. Louis community as they grapple with this tragic event that has taken place there earlier today.
Thank you. I just echo all of these comments, so agree with them and appreciate them. That takes us to 14.1. The board will meet in regular session on Monday, November 21st, 2022 at 6 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And we're adjourned.